The cameras were already in place when the Caltherian ships arrived over New Petersburg. That should have been the first warning, but nobody understood what it meant. The colony sat on the edge of human space. 7 million people living quiet lives on a world of blue oceans and green fields. They grew food, raised children, and dreamed of tomorrow. The Caltherians had other plans for them. The attack began at dawn, not with overwhelming force, but with careful precision. The aliens disabled the planetary shields first, then destroyed every ship in orbit. They jammed all communications except one channel, a single broadcast frequency that reached every corner of known space. Then they began their work. It took 72 hours. 3 full days of methodical killing, broadcast live to every species in the galaxy. The Caltherians did not use quick weapons. They herded people into city centers and executed them in groups. They burned farms with families still inside. They made sure every camera captured every moment, every scream, every plea for mercy that went unanswered. The galaxy watched in horror. Some species turned away, unable to stomach the brutality. Others watched in grim silence, thankful it was not their worlds under those guns. A few, the ones who had fought the Caltherians before, simply waited to see what would happen next. On Earth, in the emergency session of the United Nations, the mood was not what anyone expected. There was no panic in the chambers, no desperate calls for evacuation plans. Instead, there was something colder, something that made the few alien observers present deeply uncomfortable. The human representatives sat in absolute silence as the broadcast played on the screens, their faces carved from stone. When the killing finally stopped, when New Petersburg was nothing but ashes and corpses, the Caltherian High Command appeared on screen. Their spokesman was tall, his scales gleaming under studio lights, his eyes full of satisfaction. "Humans of Earth," he said, his translator making his voice smooth and clear. "You have witnessed the price of defiance. Your colony refused to acknowledge Caltherian sovereignty over this sector. This is the consequence. We are a generous empire. We offer you one chance to surrender. Acknowledge our rule, pay tribute, and no more human worlds need to burn. You have 1 standard week to comply." The broadcast ended. The screens went dark. For a long moment, nobody in the UN chamber moved. Then the Secretary General stood. She was an old woman, a grandmother who had spent her career working for peace. Her voice did not shake as she spoke. "Call a vote," she said. "Full authorization of military force. Total war protocols. No restrictions." The vote took less than 5 minutes. It was unanimous. Not a single abstention, not a single voice raised in objection. The representatives from every nation, every culture, every religion on Earth agreed on one thing. This could not stand. But it was not the vote that would terrify the Caltherinians when they learned of it later. It was what came after. The military commanders were called in immediately. Admiral Chen, the head of Earth's defense forces, stood before the assembly. He was a career soldier, a man who had spent 40 years preparing for a war he hoped would never come. "Admiral," the Secretary General said, "what are our options?" Chen pulled up a holographic display. "We have 230 warships combat ready. Another 400 in various stages of construction. We are outgunned by a factor of 10 to 1. Our technology is inferior in every meaningful way. By conventional military analysis, we cannot win." "That was not the question," the Secretary General said quietly. "I asked what our options are." Chen looked at her, then at the assembled representatives. Something passed between them, an understanding that did not need words. "We have one option," he said. "Total conversion to war economy. Every factory, every shipyard, every resource redirected to the war effort. We strip mining operations for raw materials. We weaponize civilian vessels. We remove every safety restriction and ethics protocol from our artificial intelligence systems. We do not fight a conventional war. We fight their war on their terms with their rules." "And the objective?" someone asked. Chen's face was grim. 7 million of ours died. The Caltherian Empire has an estimated population of 80 billion across 200 worlds. We kill them all, or we kill enough that they beg us to stop. There should have been objections. There should have been voices of reason, calls for restraint, pleas for sanity. Instead, there was silence. Then, one by one, the representatives began to nod. "Proportional response," the Secretary General said. "For every human killed, 10,000 Caltherinians. That is the exchange rate they established. We are simply honoring it." "It will change us," Chen warned. "We will not be the same species when this is over." They already changed us, the Secretary General replied. The moment they killed 7 million of us for entertainment. Now we show them what that change looks like. The orders went out within the hour. Across human space, the wheels of war began to turn. Factories retooled, shipyards expanded, and volunteers flooded recruitment centers. The galaxy had seen humanity at peace, had seen them as traders and explorers, scientists and dreamers. They were about to learn what humanity looked like when it went to war. And they would learn that some species, when pushed far enough, do not break. They burn everything around them instead. The transformation happened faster than anyone thought possible. Within 2 weeks of the vote, Earth looked like a different planet. The city lights that once showed entertainment districts and shopping centers now marked factory complexes running 24 hours a day. The sounds of music and laughter gave way to the thunder of manufacturing, the roar of test engines, the systematic rhythm of a civilization preparing for total war. Maria Kowalski stood in what used to be an automotive plant in Detroit. Now it produced missile guidance systems. She was 16 years old and worked the night shift, installing targeting chips with hands that never seemed to stop shaking. Her older brother had lived on New Petersburg. They never found his body. Another batch ready, her supervisor called out. Maria nodded and moved to the next assembly line. Sleep could wait. Everything could wait except this. It was the same across every human world. On Mars, the terraforming operations were suspended, and the massive atmosphere processors were retooled to produce ship armor. On the Moon, mining colonies dug deeper and faster, pulling out every gram of rare minerals needed for weapons manufacture. The orbital shipyards around Earth expanded until they formed a complete ring around the planet, each section churning out vessels of war. But it was not just the speed that made other species nervous. It was what humanity was building. Commander. Thex of the Galactic Monitoring Service watched the human construction through long-range sensors and felt something he had not experienced in his 300 years of life. Fear. The humans were not building traditional warships. They were building nightmares. A standard Caltherian cruiser was a work of art, all smooth lines and efficient design, every system optimized for maximum performance. The ships coming out of human yards looked like they had been assembled from scrap metal and hatred. They were asymmetric, ugly things covered in armor plates welded at odd angles. Weapons bristled from every surface with no regard for aesthetic balance. Some ships appeared to be nothing more than enormous engines strapped to oversized guns. They are building them wrong, Thex's second officer said, reviewing the data. Those designs violate every principle of naval architecture. Half of them should not even be space-worthy. And yet they fly, Thex replied quietly, and they carry weapons that should not exist. The humans had raided their own history for inspiration. Ancient weapons the galaxy had banned millennia ago were being manufactured in massive quantities. Nuclear warheads, biological agents, kinetic impactors, and worse, much worse. The humans had found the old treaties, the agreements that civilized species made to never use certain weapons, and they burned those treaties. We never signed your rules, the human ambassador told the Galactic Council when they objected. And the Caltherians broke every rule that matters when they murdered 7 million civilians. You want us to fight clean? Tell that to the children who burned alive in their schools while you watched and did nothing. The council had no response to that. But the ships and weapons were only part of it. The real change was happening in the humans themselves. Every city on Earth had recruitment centers with lines stretching for blocks. Men and women volunteered in numbers that overwhelmed the military's capacity to train them. Children too young to fight worked in factories and farms, keeping the economy running while their parents went to war. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned ECS Retribution and watched the fleet assemble. 3 months ago they had 200 ships. Now they had over 1,000, with more launching every day. They were not pretty ships and they were not sophisticated ships, but they were ready to kill, and that was all that mattered. Admiral, we have a communication from Caltherian intelligence, his communication officer reported. It appears to be intercepted transmissions from their spy network. Chen pulled up the data and read through it. Then he smiled for the first time in months. It was not a pleasant expression. The Caltherinians were panicking. Their intelligence services had been monitoring human communications, expecting to find fear and desperation. Instead, they found something that terrified them. The humans were not discussing whether they could win. They were discussing how many Caltherian worlds to destroy. Military planners debated targets with cold efficiency. Civilian analysts calculated resource consumption rates and projected how long it would take to sterilize each Caltherian colony. Scientists worked on more effective ways to kill on a planetary scale. And through it all, there was no doubt, no hesitation, no suggestion that perhaps they should negotiate or compromise. The humans had decided on genocide, and they were approaching it with the same industrial efficiency they brought to everything else. They are monsters, one Caltherian general had written in a report that human intelligence intercepted. We created monsters. Chen forwarded the message to every ship in the fleet with a single line of commentary. Good. Let them fear. The cultural shift was equally dramatic. Music changed first. The pop songs and love ballads disappeared from the airwaves, replaced by war hymns and marching songs. Artists who once painted landscapes now created propaganda posters showing human soldiers standing over defeated aliens. Writers churned out stories of vengeance and victory. In schools, children learned history with a new focus. They studied every great war, every desperate stand, every moment when humanity faced annihilation and survived. The teachers emphasized one lesson above all others. Humans did not start fights, but they always finished them. We are not doing this out of hate, Chen told his officers in a speech that was broadcast to every ship and every base. We are doing this out of love. Love for those we lost, love for those we protect. The Caltherinians thought they could frighten us into submission. They thought 7 million deaths would break our spirit. They were wrong. Those deaths lit a fire that will not go out until every Caltherian world is ash or every human is dead, and we do not intend to die. The fleet began moving toward Caltherian space 6 months after New Petersburg burned. 1,000 ships, each one carrying weapons that made civilized species look away in horror. Behind them, Earth's factories worked without pause, building more ships, more weapons, more instruments of destruction. The Caltherinians had wanted to see humanity afraid. They were about to learn what humanity looked like when it was angry instead. The Caltherian Border Defense Station Sentinel-7 was considered impregnable. 50 warships, advanced sensor arrays, and enough firepower to reduce a small moon to rubble. When the human fleet appeared on their sensors, the station commander felt confident. The humans were sailing into a massacre. He was right about the massacre. He was just wrong about who would die. The human fleet did not slow down or attempt to negotiate. They did not broadcast warnings or demands for surrender. They simply opened fire from maximum range and kept coming. Missiles flew in waves so dense they blocked the sensors. Kinetic rounds, simple chunks of metal accelerated to incredible speeds, punched through shields that were designed to stop energy weapons. Return fire, the Caltherian commander ordered, but his ships were already dying. A human vessel, later identified as a converted cargo hauler, rammed straight into a Caltherian cruiser at full speed. Both ships exploded, but the humans had 50 more cargo haulers right behind it. The battle lasted 14 minutes. When it ended, the Sentinel-7 station was debris and all 50 Caltherian ships were destroyed. The humans lost 112 vessels. They did not even pause to recover their dead. The fleet simply continued deeper into Caltherian space. Admiral Chen reviewed the battle reports with grim satisfaction. The ratio was poor. More than 2 human ships lost for every Caltherian vessel destroyed, but they had expected worse. And the humans had something the Caltherinians did not. They could afford the losses. They fight like animals, a surviving Caltherian officer reported to his superiors. No honor, no tactics, just mindless aggression. They sacrifice themselves without hesitation. How do you fight an enemy that does not fear death? The Caltherian military was about to learn the answer. You don't. You just die. The human fleet split into smaller groups, each one targeting different Caltherian outposts and minor colonies. They moved fast, hit hard, and left nothing behind but corpses and wreckage. And they broadcast every battle, every death, making sure the galaxy watched just as they had watched New Petersburg burn. But it was the tactics that truly horrified civilized species. The humans did not fight by any recognized rules of war. They used false surrender signals to lure Caltherian ships close, then detonated nuclear weapons. They hid antimatter bombs inside fake refugee vessels and sent them toward Caltherian stations. They deployed biological weapons that the galaxy had banned 3,000 years ago. They are violating every law of warfare, the Galactic Council protested to the human ambassador. Ambassador, Williams looked at them with cold eyes. Laws? You want to talk about laws? Where were your laws when New Petersburg died? Where were your fleets, your sanctions, your outrage? You sat and watched. Now you can sit and watch this too. The Caltharinians tried to adapt, but how do you adapt to an enemy that refuses to follow any predictable pattern? Human ships would broadcast fake distress signals, then ambush any vessels that responded. They would coat their hulls in material that absorbed sensor scans, making them invisible until they were already firing. Some human vessels were found to be literally covered in organic matter, the remains of their own dead used as a form of camouflage that fooled Caltharian sensors. Commander Zek of the Caltharian 4th Fleet stared at the analysis in disbelief. They are using their own corpses as stealth coating? Yes, sir, his science officer confirmed. The organic material disrupts our biosensors. By the time we identify them as ships, they are already in weapons range. Zek felt something break inside him. This was not war. This was something else. Something older and darker that his species had forgotten in their long centuries of dominance. The humans reached their first major target 3 months into the war. Colony world Carthex 7, population 140 million. It was a beautiful world with vast cities and advanced infrastructure. The Caltharinians had a strong defensive fleet in orbit. The human fleet arrived and did not engage the defenders. Instead, they deployed a new weapon that Caltharian intelligence had not seen before. Atmospheric igniters, devices that would cause a chain reaction in the planet's oxygen-rich atmosphere. The Caltharinians had 8 hours to evacuate 140 million people. They managed to save 12 million before the devices activated. The planet burned. The atmosphere turned into a globe of fire that consumed everything on the surface. Cities melted, oceans boiled, and 128 million Caltharinians died screaming. The human fleet broadcast every second of it, the same way the Caltharinians had broadcast New Petersburg. This is the exchange rate you established, Admiral Chen said in a message sent to every Caltharian world. 7 million of ours for billions of yours. We will stop when we reach 70 billion dead, or when you surrender your leaders for trial. Those are your only options. The Caltharian High Command held an emergency session. They had expected the humans to seek terms to negotiate, to at least try to minimize casualties. They had not expected this cold mathematical approach to mass murder. We must negotiate, one counselor argued. This genocide will destroy us. They will not negotiate, the intelligence chief replied. I have read every intercepted communication. They have decided on our extinction, and they are pursuing it with absolute determination. The only question is whether they will stop at 70 billion or simply keep going until we are all dead. The truth was settling in across Caltharian space. They had started this war thinking they were the predators and the humans were prey. They had been catastrophically wrong. The humans were not prey. They were something the Caltharinians had not encountered in their long history of conquest. They were the predator that other predators learned to fear. The human advance continued. More colonies burned. More fleets were destroyed. The Caltharinians threw everything they had at the human forces. But it was like trying to stop a tsunami with a wall of sand. For every human ship destroyed, 3 more appeared. For every weapon the Caltharians deployed, the humans found a counter or simply ignored it and kept attacking. Caltharian soldiers began to surrender, but the humans rarely took prisoners in those early months. The orders from Earth were clear. No mercy until the quota was met. 70 billion Caltharian lives for 7 million human ones. It was not personal. It was just math. In the 6th month of the war, a Caltharian general named Voth found himself in command of a defensive fleet guarding an industrial world. He watched the human forces approach and knew his fleet could not stop them. He sent a message to his family telling them he loved them. Then he formed his ships into a defensive sphere and prepared to die. The human fleet tore through his defenses in less than an hour. As his flagship broke apart around him, Voth's last thought was simple and terrible. His species had doomed itself the day it decided to make an example of humanity. The protests started on Earth 9 months into the war. They were small at first, a few hundred people gathering in city squares holding signs that asked a simple question. What have we become? Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to the Admiral, stood before the United Nations and spoke words that many were thinking but few dared to say. We have killed 42 billion Caltharinians. 42 billion. Most of them civilians. Most of them had nothing to do with New Petersburg. We are committing the very atrocity we swore to avenge." The chamber was silent. Then the Secretary General spoke, her voice tired but firm. "Dr. Chen, do you remember New Petersburg? Do you remember the broadcasts? They did not kill soldiers. They killed families. They killed children. They made us watch every single death for 72 hours. And when we cried for mercy, they laughed. When we begged them to stop, they killed more. They set the rules of this war, not us. But we can choose to end it," Dr. Chen insisted. "We can be better than them. Can we?" The Secretary General pulled up a holographic display. "This is a message we intercepted from Caltherian High Command 2 days ago. They are not preparing to surrender. They are planning a counterattack on civilian targets. 3 of our colonies, 28 million people. They learned nothing. They feel no remorse. If we stop now, they will rebuild and they will come for us again. The only question is how many more humans have to die before you are satisfied that we have been merciful enough." Dr. Chen had no answer. Neither did the protesters outside. The war machine continued, but the debate raged across human space. News networks carried endless discussions about morality and necessity. Philosophers wrote papers on the ethics of proportional response. Religious leaders struggled to reconcile their teachings with the reality of industrial-scale killing. And through it all, the soldiers kept fighting, the factories kept producing, and the death toll kept climbing. Lieutenant Marcus Webb sat in the mess hall of the ECS Vengeance and stared at his food. He had been a cargo pilot before the war, flying supply runs between Earth and Mars. Now he flew a bomber that carried weapons capable of sterilizing entire cities. He had dropped those weapons 17 times. He could not sleep anymore without seeing the fires. "You okay, Marcus?" his wingman asked. "I killed 8 million people yesterday," Marcus said quietly. "Colony World Tresh 3. We burned it from orbit. I can still see them on the scanners trying to flee, trying to escape. There was nowhere to go. I killed 8 million people, and tomorrow I will kill more, and I do not know if I can keep doing this." His wingman, a woman named Rita Okonkwo, sat down across from him. She had lost her wife and daughter on New Petersburg. "I know," she said. "I know it is horrible. I know we are doing terrible things. But Marcus, listen to me. If we stop, if we show weakness, they will do it again. They will pick another colony, another 7 million people, and they will burn them. The only reason they might stop is because they are afraid we will kill them all. The moment they stop being afraid, our people die. So we keep killing them until they surrender, or until there are none of them left. That is the choice they gave us." Marcus looked at her. "And what happens to us? What happens to our souls when this is over?" Rita's eyes were hard and sad. "I do not know, but I would rather burn in whatever hell exists than let more children die the way mine did." The galactic community was watching with increasing horror. Several species attempted to intervene, to broker a peace deal, to stop what they saw as a mutual genocide. The Talvori hegemony, a powerful neutral empire, sent their most skilled diplomat to negotiate with both sides. Ambassador Thalvin met with human representatives first. He was a being of pure energy, his form shifting and glowing with inner light. He had negotiated peace treaties for 1,000 years. He believed that all conflicts could be resolved through understanding and compromise. "The Caltherinians are willing to discuss terms," he told the human delegation. "They will pay reparations. They will surrender territory. They will punish those responsible for New Petersburg. You do not have to destroy their entire civilization." Ambassador Williams listened politely. Then she pulled up a display. "This is a list of every human colony. There are 47 of them. Before the war, the Caltherinians marked 12 of them for demonstrations like New Petersburg. 84 million people scheduled to die to make us obey. So tell me, Ambassador Thalvin, how do we compromise with that? Do we let them kill only half? Do we negotiate down to 40 million dead instead of 84? But you have killed so many more than that," Thalvin protested. 42 billion Caltherinians are dead. Surely that is enough revenge. Revenge? Williams laughed bitterly. "This is not revenge, Ambassador. This is self-defense. We are making sure that no species in this galaxy ever looks at humanity and thinks easy target again. We are teaching a lesson that will last for 10,000 years. You can hate us, you can fear us, you can even fight us. But if you massacre our civilians, if you try to terrorize us into submission, we will burn your civilization to ash and dance on the graves. That is the lesson, and it will be written in Caltherian blood. Thalvin left the meeting shaken. He had never encountered such cold determination, such absolute refusal to bend or compromise. He reported back to the hegemony that the humans were beyond reason, but there were cracks forming in the human resolve. The protests grew larger. Some military units began to refuse orders to attack purely civilian targets. A human cruiser captain named David Okafor made headlines when he deliberately missed his target coordinates, sparing a Caltherian city of 2 million. He was court-martialed and executed for disobeying orders in wartime. The execution was broadcast as a warning to others. The message was clear. There would be no mercy, no hesitation, not until the quota was met. Admiral Chen felt the weight of every death. He kept a running count in his quarters, updated daily: 42 billion, 600 million, 307,212. Every single one of them on his conscience, on humanity's conscience. Sometimes he wondered if Dr. Sarah Chen was right, if they had become the monsters they sought to destroy. Then he would watch the New Petersburg broadcasts again, force himself to see every moment, and the doubt would fade. They had not started this. They had not wanted this. But they would finish it, no matter the cost. The Caltherian Empire was collapsing. Worlds were surrendering individually, hoping to escape the human wrath. The central government was fragmenting as different factions argued about how to respond. Some wanted to fight to the last, to take as many humans with them as possible. Others wanted to surrender immediately, to preserve what little remained of their civilization. But the humans were not interested in partial surrenders. They had one demand repeated over and over: hand over the high command, the leaders who had ordered New Petersburg's destruction, or watch your entire species die. The Caltherian leadership was trapped in their fortress homeworld, watching their empire burn around them, knowing that the humans were coming and that nothing would stop them. The human fleet arrived at Calth Prime 18 months after New Petersburg burned. The Caltherian homeworld hung in space like a jewel. 8 billion souls living on the cradle of their civilization. It was defended by what remained of their military. Every ship they could gather, every weapon they could deploy. They knew they could not win, but they would die trying. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the ECS Retribution and broadcast a message on all frequencies. People of Calth Prime, you have one option. Surrender the members of your high command who ordered the New Petersburg massacre. You have 24 hours. If they are not in our custody by then, your planet burns. The response came 3 hours later. The Caltherian High Command appeared on screen. 7 beings who had ruled an empire and reduced it to ashes through their arrogance. Their spokesman was the same one who had gloated over New Petersburg's destruction. We will never surrender to you, he declared. We are Caltherian. We have ruled this sector for 10,000 years. We will not bow to a primitive species of jumped-up apes. Chen cut the transmission. He turned to his weapons officer. Target the capital city. Conventional weapons only. I want them to feel it before the end comes. The bombardment began at dawn on Calth Prime. Kinetic weapons rained from orbit, each one carrying the force of a small nuclear weapon. The Caltherian capital, a city of crystal towers and ancient monuments, shattered under the assault. Millions died in the first hour, but the civilian population had had enough. As the bombardment continued, a group of Caltherian military officers stormed the high command bunker. There was a brief firefight, then silence. 6 hours later, a transmission came from the surface. This is General Kravex of the Caltherian Defense Force. We have arrested the high command. We are transmitting their location. Please stop the bombardment. Our people have suffered enough. Chen called a ceasefire. Marines were deployed to the surface to take custody of the prisoners. The 7 members of the high command were brought aboard the Retribution in chains. They looked smaller somehow, less impressive than they had on the broadcasts. Just old beings who had made a terrible mistake and doomed their species for it. The trial was held on New Petersburg. The ruins of the colony had been preserved, left exactly as the Caltherinians had left them. The courthouse was built among the ashes, surrounded by the mass graves of 7 million dead. The proceedings were broadcast across the galaxy, just as New Petersburg's destruction had been. Every species watched as the evidence was presented, the orders read aloud, the casualty figures tallied. The high command members offered no defense. What defense could they offer? The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all counts. The sentence was death. But it was not a quick death. For each member of the High Command, the execution would take 72 hours, the same amount of time it took them to kill New Petersburg. The galaxy debated whether this was justice or just more cruelty. Humanity did not care what the galaxy thought anymore. When it was over, when the last member of the High Command had died, Admiral Chen stood before the cameras and addressed the galaxy. The final count is 68,700,000,000 Caltharinians dead. Their empire is broken. Their military is disbanded. Their homeworld is under human occupation. This war is over. He paused, his face carved from stone in regret. Let this be a lesson to every species watching. Humanity wants peace. We want to explore, to learn, to build friendships among the stars. But if you mistake our kindness for weakness, if you think you can terrorize us into submission, if you raise your hand against our innocent, then this is what awaits you. We will not stop. We will not falter. We will burn your civilization to the ground and make sure the ashes never rise again. The human fleets began the long journey home. Their ships were scarred and battered, their crews exhausted and changed. Earth welcomed them with parades and speeches, but the celebrations felt hollow. Everyone knew the price that had been paid, both in Caltharian lives and in humanity's soul. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the New Petersburg Memorial on the anniversary of the massacre. 7 million names were carved into black stone, each one a person with dreams and hopes that ended in fire. Human warships orbited overhead, a permanent guard ensuring that no one would ever disturb this place. Was it worth it? Someone asked her. Sarah looked at the names, then up at the warships. I do not know. We saved humanity from becoming victims again, but we did it by becoming something we never wanted to be. We proved we could not be terrorized, but we also proved we could commit atrocities that rival anything the Caltharinians did. History will judge us, and I am not sure the verdict will be kind. Across the galaxy, that judgment was already forming. Some species looked at humanity with respect, even admiration. Others looked at them with fear and horror. A few looked at them with calculation, wondering if they could ever be controlled or defeated. But all of them understood one thing. Humanity was no longer the newcomers, the young species just finding their way among the stars. They were now a power that could not be ignored or dismissed. They had taken their place through fire and steel, through sacrifice and slaughter, through absolute refusal to accept defeat. The Caltharian homeworld remained under human occupation for a decade. A new government was established, one that would never forget what happened when they challenged humanity. The surviving Caltharinians rebuilt slowly, their population reduced to a fraction of what it once was, their empire gone forever. On Earth, life slowly returned to something like normal. The factories converted back to civilian production. The soldiers came home and tried to remember who they had been before the war. Some succeeded. Many did not. The nightmares would last for generations. Lieutenant Marcus Webb lived for another 40 years. He never flew again after the war. He spent his time teaching children about history, making sure they understood the cost of what had been done. We did terrible things, he told them. But we did them to protect you, to make sure no one would ever hurt you the way they hurt New Petersburg. I hope you never have to make the choices we made. I hope you can build a better future than we did. Ambassador Williams retired and wrote a book about the war. She called it The Price of Safety. In it, she argued that humanity had done what was necessary, that the alternative would have been worse. But she ended the book with a question that haunted her until her death. At what point does self-defense become indistinguishable from the evil you are defending against? Admiral Chen died 10 years after the war ended. His last words were reported to be, 7 million. I hope it was enough. The galaxy moved on. New conflicts arose, new alliances formed, new threats emerged. But the memory of what happened when humanity went to war remained. It became a legend, a cautionary tale told to species considering aggression. Do not wake the humans, the saying went. They are peaceful until you give them a reason not to be, and then they are the most dangerous thing in the universe. New Petersburg remained a tomb, a monument to 7 million dead and the 68 billion who died in response. Human ships guarded it eternally, a reminder of what humanity had lost and what they had become to protect themselves. The stars turned overhead, indifferent to the struggles of the species living beneath them. Humanity continued to explore, to build, to reach for the future, but they carried scars now. marks that would never fully heal. They had learned what they were capable of when pushed to the edge, and that knowledge changed them forever. Some said humanity had won the war but lost their innocence. Others said they had simply revealed what they always were beneath the surface. Perhaps both were true. Perhaps the real lesson was that every species has the capacity for both great compassion and terrible violence, and the difference between them is often just a matter of circumstances and choices. Humanity had made their choice. They had chosen survival over mercy, vengeance over forgiveness, fire over surrender, and they would live with that choice for better or worse until the end of their days among the stars.